The night was electric. November 4th, 2008. Chicago's Grant Park overflowed with people. Flags waved, tears streamed, and strangers hugged like family. For the first time in history, America had elected a black president. But behind the cheers, the Secret Service was on edge. Radios crackled with urgent codes, snipers scanned rooftops, and agents tightened the perimeter. Because while millions celebrated, millions hated what they were seeing. And in that very moment, Barack Obama stood backstage, about to walk out and face the world. His smile was calm, but his thoughts raced back to the boy he once was. Boy who was told he didn't belong. He remembered the classroom whispers, the sideways glances, the racial slurs. He remembered Michelle being followed in a store, treated like a suspect instead of a customer. He remembered the letters filled with hate that poured in during the campaign. Tonight wasn't just a victory. It was survival. Every step toward that. Podium carried the weight of centuries of struggle, sacrifice, and blood. And yet, as the crowd roared louder, one question hung in the air, a question only America could answer. Would this moment mark the beginning of true change, or would it unleash a storm of resistance like never before? Before the stadium lights, the cheering crowds, and the armored motorcades, there was just a boy. Barack Hussein Obama II was born on August 4, 1961, in Honolulu, Hawaii. His mother, Ann Dunham, was a white woman from Kansas. His father, Barack Obama Sr., was a black man from Kenya. In a time when interracial marriage was still illegal in many states, their union itself was an act of quiet defiance. But young Barack didn't grow up in a world that celebrated diversity. He grew up in a world where he was constantly asked, "Who are you? Where do you belong?" As a child in Hawaii, he was often the only black face in his classroom. Teachers praised him for being articulate, a word loaded with surprise. Some classmates teased him for his skin color, for his unusual name, for not fitting neatly into any box. He once overheard another boy whisper, "Why is his hair like that?" Those whispers stung more than shouts ever could. When his mother remarried, Barack spent part of his childhood in Indonesia. He learned resilience there, but also loneliness. He was different again, not quite local, not quite foreign, and, in the quiet of those nights, he wrestled with questions bigger than any child should have to face. Am I too dark for some? Too light for others? Am I American enough? Back in Hawaii as a teenager, those questions didn't disappear. Walking into convenience stores, he noticed the stares. Playing basketball on the courts, he felt both accepted and judged. At times, he turned to humor, making light of the things that hurt him most. But inside, the weight of identity pressed heavily. Barack found refuge in books. He devoured biographies of leaders, speeches by Martin Luther King Jr., and writings about the civil rights struggle. Each page gave him a sense of belonging, a thread connecting him to a wider story of people who fought, endured, and rose. Yet even as he carved a place for himself, the world reminded him of his difference. When he left for college on the mainland, first at Occidental College in Los Angeles, then latter at Columbia University in New York, racism became more pronounced. On sidewalks, strangers crossed the street when they saw him coming. In stores, clerks kept a suspicious eye. Sometimes cab drivers refused to stop for him at night. He was no longer just a student anymore. In the eyes of many, he was a young, black man to be feared. It wasn't just Barack. Years later, Michelle Obama would share her own stories. As a successful attorney and future First Lady, she, too, knew the sting of racial profiling. She remembered being followed in department stores as if she might steal something. She remembered people clutching their purses tighter when she walked by. And she remembered the unspoken message: no matter your degrees, no matter your success, your skin still speaks louder than your resume. When Barack eventually settled in Chicago after law school, these experiences shaped his path. The South Side was full of people who looked like him, but it was also full of pain. Factories shutting down, families struggling, children growing up without hope. Barack didn't just see statistics. He saw himself in those kids. He knew the feeling of being doubted, of being dismissed, of being othered. So when he took a job as a community organizer, it wasn't glamorous. The pay was small, the offices were cramped, and the victories were few. But it was real. He sat in living rooms listening to families who had lost jobs. He stood in church basements organizing meetings about housing and schools. He walked streets where opportunity seemed like a stranger. And slowly, something grew inside him. A conviction. A belief that the fight against racism and inequality wasn't just about speeches or laws. It was about presence, about showing up, about giving people a voice. Still, doubt never fully left him. At Harvard Law School, where he became the first black president of the Harvard Law Review, Barack's rise was celebrated in the media. Yet alongside the praise came the backlash. Letters accused him of being a token. Others claimed he had only been chosen because of his race. Every triumph carried a shadow, a reminder that for some, his success would always be seen as unearned. And so, as he walked the path from Hawaii to Chicago, from classrooms to community halls, Barack Obama carried two truths. One, that America had space for his story, and two, that every step forward would demand proof, resilience, and courage far greater than most would ever know. But little did he realize, the fight had only just begun. Chicago shaped Barack Obama, but it also tested him. The city was a microcosm of America, neighborhoods divided not just by class, but by color. On the South Side, black families struggled to keep schools open and jobs alive. On the North Side, wealth and privilege painted a different picture. For Obama, these streets weren't just maps. They were lessons. As a community organizer, he realized something quickly. People didn't trust politicians. They trusted neighbors, pastors, teachers, and anyone who showed up consistently. So, Barack knocked on doors, sat in kitchens, and listened to frustrations about broken promises. He wasn't a savior. He was a listener. That, more than anything, earned respect. But listening wasn't enough. To make real change, he needed power. And so, after Harvard Law and a return to Chicago, he ran for the Illinois State Senate in 1996. The campaign was modest. No big money, no fancy ads, just handshakes, church visits, and late nights spent strategizing with volunteers. Michelle worried about the toll, long hours, constant travel, the grind of politics. Yet she also knew her husband's heart. Barack isn't in this for himself, she once said. He's in this for the people who never get heard. He won. And in Springfield, he became known for bridging divides. Republicans and Democrats alike noted his calm, his ability to see both sides. But outside the chamber, whispers lingered. Some lawmakers mocked his name. Who is this Obama guy, anyway? Others hinted he was too ambitious, too different. Still, he pushed forward. He tackled campaign finance reform, worked on health, care access, and fought against racial profiling by police. Small victories stacked up. His reputation grew. Then came 2004. Barack was invited to deliver the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention in Boston. Most Americans had never heard his name. But that night, everything changed. Tonight, he declared, there's not a Black America and a White America and a Latino America and an Asian America. There's the United States of America. The arena erupted. Television networks replayed. His speech on loop. Overnight, Obama became a national figure. But fame cut both ways. Along with admiration came suspicion. Hate mail poured in. Some called him too radical. Others labeled him not black enough to represent African Americans, while some insisted he was too black for white voters. conspiracy theories spread about his faith, his birthplace, and his loyalty. One evening, as he tucked his daughters Malia and Sasha A into bed, Michelle whispered, "Are you sure about this path? The higher you go, the uglier it gets." Barack paused. He wasn't sure. But he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away. Not when so many kids like him were still being told they didn't belong. In 2008, he launched his campaign for president. What started as a long shot quickly became a movement. Young people flooded campuses with signs that read, "Hope" and "Yes, we can." Crowds stretched for miles. Donors gave in small amounts, millions of them. America hadn't seen energy like this in decades. But behind the hope, darkness lurked. The FBI logged a historic surge in death threats. At rallies, some shouted racial slurs. Posters appeared with his face doctored into offensive caricatures. Conservative talk radio painted him as an enemy within. Secret Service agents warned Michelle never to take her eyes off the girls in public. The contrast was sharp. On one side, chants of "Yes, we can." On the other hand, mutters of "Never him." At one rally in Pennsylvania, as Barack shook hands with supporters, an agent suddenly stepped between him and the crowd. A man in the distance had shouted, "He'll never make it out alive!" Police later found nothing on him. But the message was clear. Every handshake carried risk. And yet, the campaign pressed forward. Each state he won built momentum. Iowa, South Carolina, Texas. America was watching history unfold. But history doesn't happen without resistance. At almost every stop, someone questioned his Americanness. Was he born here? Was he Muslim? Could he really be trusted with the nuclear codes? Even allies felt pressure. Some Democrats whispered, "Maybe it's too soon for a black president. Maybe America's not ready." But Barack refused to bend. "If we wait for the perfect moment," he told his team, "we'll wait forever." By summer 2008, the race was neck and neck. Crowds chanted his name, but protesters held signs that read, "Terrorist." Reporters asked if his middle name, Hussein, would cost him votes. Volunteers faced threats. Michelle was caricatured as angry and unpatriotic. And yet, the movement grew. At one town hall, a little black boy tugged at Obama's sleeve and asked, "Are you really going to be president?" Barack knelt down, looked him in the eye, and said, "Yes, I am, because kids like you need to see it." It wasn't just a campaign anymore. It was a test of America's soul. But just as victory seemed closer, the threats grew louder. White supremacist groups plotted in secret. Online forums buzzed with coded language about stopping him by any means. The Secret Service doubled its detail. Agents whispered into microphones as he moved through rope lines. Every rally carried tension thick enough to choke. And through it all, Barack carried himself with calm. Smiling, shaking hands, speaking with hope. Yet privately, he admitted to Michelle, the hardest part isn't the danger. It's knowing how much hate is still out there. What happened next would push him, and America, to the edge. November 4th, 2008. Chicago's Grant Park pulsed with life. Nearly 250,000 people packed the park, their breath forming clouds in the chilly night air. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders. Elderly men and women, many who had marched for civil rights in the 1960s, stood arm in arm with tears in their eyes. The giant screens glowed with election results, state by state, the numbers tipping closer to history. Inside a secure hotel suite nearby, Barack Obama sat with Michelle, Malia, and Sasha. The TV called another state in his favor, then another. Finally, Ohio, a bellwether state. With that projection, the room erupted. Advisors hugged. Michelle smiled through tears. Malia squealed. Sasha asked, "Daddy, does this mean you really won?" Barack just nodded, speechless. But while joy filled the suite, tension gripped the Secret Service. Every additional minute meant more risk. Agents checked their watches, tightened their earpieces. Reports of threats had spiked that very night. White supremacist chatter online was at its highest since the campaign began. And then, at exactly 10 p.m. CST, networks made it official. Barack Obama had been elected the 44th President of the United States, the first black man in history to hold the office. Grant Park exploded in sound. Cheers thundered like waves. Strangers hugged, sobbed, and danced. Across the nation, church. Bells rang, fireworks cracked, and millions watched with disbelief and joy. But amid the celebration, agents moved swiftly, forming a shield around the family. One wrong step, one overlooked detail, could turn triumph into tragedy. As Barack walked toward the stage, his heart pounded. Every cheer felt like a prayer, every scream like a warning. He thought of his mother, long gone but present in spirit. He thought of his father, who never lived to see this. He thought of Martin Luther King Jr., of Medgar Evers, of Rosa Parks, of all the lives lost so he could walk this path. He gripped Michelle's hand. "Ready?" he whispered. She squeezed back. "Always." And then they stepped into history. The roar was deafening. Flags waved as far as the eye could see. On the massive stage, Obama looked out over the sea of faces. Black, white, Latino, Asian, young, old, rich, poor. America, in all its fractured beauty, stared back at him. He began his speech, his voice steady despite the storm of emotion inside. If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, tonight is your answer. The words carried across the park, across television screens, across continents. Tears fell freely. Jesse Jackson, who had marched with King, wept openly in the crowd. Families hugged tighter. Children pointed at the screens, as if to lock this moment into memory forever. But not everyone cheered. Behind the barricades, protesters shouted into the night. Across the country, in homes and online forums, anger boiled. Hate didn't vanish, it simmered. The Secret Service braced, scanning rooftops, monitoring radio chatter. Still, Barack pressed on. His voice rose. "This is your victory. You did this because you believed in the impossible." And for a brief moment, the impossible felt real. Yet even as fireworks lit the sky, Barack knew the truth. Victory was not the end. It was the beginning of a new battle, one waged not in rallies, but in the daily grind of the presidency. The threats would not fade. The resistance would not rest. But for tonight, history belonged to hope. The morning after victory, the sun rose over Washington, D.C., gilding the White House in soft light. For the first time in over 2 centuries, the man preparing to step inside would not be white. To millions, it felt like a dream, proof that America could finally break its oldest barrier. But the dream collided quickly with reality. Even before Obama placed his hand on the Bible to take the oath, the threats escalated. The Secret Service reported more danger in those months than any modern president had faced. And then came the backlash. Congress dug in. Commentators mocked his every move. Conspiracy theories surged. He wasn't born here. He's a secret Muslim. He hates America. Each lie gained traction, feeding a movement that questioned not his policies, but his very legitimacy. Inside the White House, the Obamas raised their daughters with as much normalcy as possible. Homework at the kitchen table, family dinners, bedtime stories. Yet Michelle remembered times when friends whispered about the hate-filled signs they saw at rallies. "Imagine explaining to your children why people hold up pictures of their father with a noose around his neck," she later said. Still, Obama pressed on. He worked to stabilize an economy in freefall, expanded health care, ended the war in Iraq, and ordered the operation that killed Osama bin Laden. Each achievement proved what determination could do. But with every step, resistance hardened. For some Americans, his very presence in the Oval Office was an unforgivable offense. And yet, his presidency changed something deeper than laws. For millions of children who once wondered if the color of their skin set a ceiling, Obama's rise shattered that ceiling. A new generation grew up seeing possibilities where once there had only been doubt. In church basements, elders whispered, "I never thought I'd see this day." In classrooms, teachers reminded students, "Look at him, it's proof that you can be anything." Across the world, Obama's election reshaped how people saw America. Not perfect, not finished, but still striving toward its promise. But perhaps the most powerful impact wasn't in politics or policy. It was in the mirror. Young boys and girls who had been told you don't belong now had a living answer to that lie. Of course, racism didn't vanish. If anything, it found new voices, louder platforms. The years after Obama would show just how deeply divided America remained. But history cannot be erased, and November 4th, 2008, ensured that no child could ever again be told that the White House was off limits because of their skin. Barack Obama himself once reflected, "Change is never easy, change is never quick, but change is always possible." His story was proof. He was the boy with the strange name who sat alone at recess, the teenager who heard whispers about his skin and his hair, the young man who couldn't always catch a cab, who was watched in stores, who was told, "America isn't ready for someone like you." And yet, he became the President of the United States. Barack Obama's story isn't just about one man. It's about a nation wrestling with its past and reaching for its future. It's about how hope and hate can exist side by side in the same streets at the same time. Because every cheer in Grant Park was shadowed by a death threat. Every "yes, we can" was answered with a "never him." So the question isn't just what Obama achieved. The question is, what about us? Do we allow fear and prejudice to define America, or do we keep proving, again and again, that change is possible? History gave us the answer once. What answer will we give the next? Time? If you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, share this video and comment below. What does hope mean to you today?